Welcome to our Early Jazz Drummers Forum. And tonight we're all going to be reacting to different versions played by different drummers of the same jazz classic. This is Bugle Call Rag. So more about that in a moment, but I'll let the guys introduce themselves.
Hello, folks. Hal Smith from Searcy, Arkansas, a drummer since 1963, but I learn something new every time I come on one of these panels with my rhythm brothers.
Hello, my name is Nick Ball. I'm from Bristol, now living in London. And once again, it's an absolute pleasure to be joining you all online for one of these sessions.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin Dorn in New York City, and as Hal said, I always learn something when I talk with you guys and listen to recordings with you, so I'm excited to do it again with this slightly different format.
Jack Amblin from Wales, and yeah, it's nice to be back with you guys. I feel like I'm the pupil in all these discussions, so it's great to learn from the pros.
Lovely. I think you know more than you think you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Josh Duffy in the heart of the Midwest here in Davenport, Iowa. Love being in Vix's hometown, playing the music that he brought to life so many years ago. And I'm so delighted to be here again with all of my drumming friends. And I always learn something. And they're some of the best friends a guy could have for drumming and getting to visit with in person, which I can't wait to do soon. So.
I'm John Petters. I'm in Lincolnshire on the east coast of England, and I'm hosting the Roundtable as usual. Josh, you're up first. So tell us about your track, please.
Yes, we get to have a great track. I don't think you're going to hear anything else like it. It's called Bugle Call Rag, and it's going to be a great track from 1927 with Red Nichols and his 5 pennies. And what makes this even better is we're celebrating the birthday boy, Vic Berton, who has a birthday tomorrow. So this is like a perfect track to celebrate the great Vic Berton. And his name was actually Victor Cohen, and then it was changed to Victor Berton after that. But born in the Chicago area, played in the Milwaukee area, played with the symphonies, and then, of course, got his name going from there. And I've been doing a lot of jazz history research on him, and it's neat what I've been finding about his life. I mean, all with Art Kahn playing with him in Chicago, and got a piece of sheet music with him on that. But his drumming with Red Nichols is some of my favorite, along with Chauncey Morehouse and Baby Dodds and Zutty. And one of the most musical drummers. I know Hal had picked him before, and but there's so much you can talk about with Berton because he was such a creative drummer and just amazing what would happen when he got behind the drums. And have to thank Alex Mendham because he found a new video clip of Vic Berton drumming and sent it to us. And Vic is going wild behind the drums. And I was like, almost peeing my pants, like, oh my gosh, finally we find it. Alex found it. Great. And so as people always say, keep digging. There's always something out there. So you never know what you're going to find. So I don't know how many times I've watched that clip and I'm just like, I get chills every time I see it. So I can only imagine him and drumming the way he did, like with Bugle Call Rag, and you hear him on the hot timpani behind Miff Mole, and then the hot cymbal riff that he does, it's like signature Berton right there. But I think what's great is that you have a supporting cast of musicians in this with Arthur Schutt, Jimmy Dorsey, Joe Venuti, and Eddie Lang. Joe Venuti was added on this particular recording session. And then, of course, Red Nichols on cornet. But then you have the Baron at the piano, Arthur Schutt. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, that's why it's a dream come true hearing this. So yeah, when Hal had this as one of the selections, this is one of my favorite recordings. And they have the series, the Jazz Oracle series, and there's like 3 volumes of them of like the Red Nichols Brunswick. And I've got all 3 of those. But I brought, that we mentioned last time, the Red Nichols on Edison. This is the one that I've listened to so many times. This is a beautiful disc. If anybody doesn't have it who's watching, hop online, find this disc. I like CD copies. You can read the liner notes. But again, you're going to hear the brilliant drumming of Vic Berton on that. But especially on Bugle Call Rag, just listen to what he's doing. It's just mind-boggling what he does.
what are your reactions to that track?
I enjoyed that. Yeah, that's like it can only really be him, can't it? With that hot timpani. I wish that was a thing and that just carried on. Imagine if we'd all have them as part of our setup now. Wouldn't that be amazing if that'd be the thing? But yeah, no, I quite enjoyed it. There's it's funny to hear. I wonder if any of the other ones have so much strings on as that arrangement. It was very soft isn't the word, but it was like a very typical orchestra arrangement of it, if you know what I mean. But I really enjoyed some of the breaks, some of those great like offbeat unison string bits. And there was one break that I don't know if it went a bit awry, but I felt like, oh, there's something funny happened there. So I wonder if that was like just what happened in the recording, and it got, and you know, it's a single take in it. So I enjoyed that. It's a great feeling, and yeah, I always like hearing the timps. Really, was anyone out? Were any other drummers known for doing hot timpani, or was that solely a Vic Berton thing?
I believe primarily Berton. I haven't heard too many other drummers doing like hot timpani. I mean, I know Sonny Greer would use it with the Ellington band, and he could have done something on a live show that we didn't know about. But again, with that type of an arrangement, I mean, that allowed Vic to be able to do that. And Red knew that he could do that. And so much so that in the 30s, when he was done recording with his orchestra, he actually gave up the jazz scene and went classical. He was playing in LA. So he had the classical chops to do that.
Yes. Yeah, it's great. You enjoyed it?
Splendid. Thank you, Jack. And thank you, Josh. Kevin, what did you make of that?
Yeah, that was great. And the thing that struck me the most was just all the different sounds he's getting out of that cymbal. And it just really shows you what you can do just with even one part of the drum set, you know, just how he was opening it, you know, playing it open, closed, varying the rhythms. I mean, that was just sort of a master class right there in how to do that. And everything, all of these drummers that we're talking about, I think because they're great drummers, they're of course playing just the perfect thing for the music. And sometimes it's easy to concentrate just on the drums, but to realize that of course it's part of a band, and what he was playing, it just fit so perfectly. And that cymbal work was incredible. I also just want to say, there are a couple of recordings where George Wettling takes a few breaks on timpani. And there's one, slightly off topic, but there's one where it's in the studio with the Condon band. And when he plays it, you hear, I think it's a tag at the end of That's a Plenty, 50s recording. And you hear the drums drop out, and then he plays this timpani break. And then the band comes in for the last four, but there's no drums. And then the drums come back in halfway through that. And then the whole band cracks up, and that's on the recording. And the bass player on that was Leonard Gaskin, who I was very lucky to get to play with a lot years ago. And I asked him about that one time, and he said, oh yeah, that timpani was just there in the studio. We didn't know he was going to do that. He didn't tell us. That's why you can hear us on the record. But this was really great. Vic Berton was such a master, and I would always hope, we were joking before about having a time machine, what I would give to be able to hear any of these players back then live, and to hear it in that kind of sound quality, and really hear every nuance that they're doing. But someone like that is such a great drummer that here again, just the cymbal stuff alone is fantastic.
Great stuff. Thank you, Kevin. Nick, what did you think?
Someone's battery's running. Okay, I just want to quickly flag that up. Good. Okay. I mean, as we said when I think it was Hal played Berton before, it's just the kind of like rhythmic house style that they all have, and they're playing the same sort of phrases on their different instruments, and he fits right in with that. And it's masterful, isn't it? And the other thing I was going to ask is, we've sort of talked a bit about playing styles, but also, I mean, it's interesting to ask the question about the actual instrument itself, because that cymbal, that Vic Berton cymbal, it's such a specific sound. You can pick that cymbal out of an identity parade. Oh, that's definitely Berton. And recently I've come around to the conclusion that there's some kind of sizzling sound on it, whether that's him holding something underneath, because I know Pollack used to hold a drum key underneath the cymbal. or whether it's just the other stick, because, when he's playing all his tricky cymbal stuff, whether it's the butt of the other stick. But I'm just saying, I was thinking about, Josh was saying about the new piece of film that's been found of him. It's such a shame there isn't more film of him playing in that style, because we could see what the hell he's actually doing, because I can't quite place what makes that cymbal sound like it does. I'm not sure it's just the instrument itself. I think he's doing something to it. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm just, I'm curious here. I'm just going to pick your brains here, really.
I think my guess would be the stick, because I've done that quite a few times. Hamburg getting with that stick underneath. I mean, that would be my first guess. And he's got a 16-inch, actually 14-inch cymbal is what he's got, 14, 15, and that stick underneath. And it's that sound. And I've tried the drum key and then I've tried the stick. I'm like, that stick just sounds a lot better. So yeah, I've
tried both and neither really cut it somehow. It didn't sound like Berton anyway. It's probably more to do with me than the cymbal, but anyway.
I think I remember an interview with Gene Krupa where he said that Vic Berton would sometimes have a coin also, like a silver dollar or something.
Yeah, or rings maybe or something. I don't know. Maybe that was.
But yeah, that's however he's doing it. It's a great and yes, very identifiable sound.
Lovely, thank you, Hal.
Joe Jones talked about that same kind of thing. He said you can get that effect by holding a quarter under the cymbal, and I've tried that many times, and I always drop the quarters, so I don't do that too much. I depend on my other stick to get that kind of sizzling sound. Have you all seen that short of the Jazz Mania Quartet with Georgie Stoll on violin and a drummer just playing choke cymbal, standing up to play the choke cymbal? That's on YouTube, and he's getting the same kinds of sounds as Vic Berton. And I looked at it, I don't see two sticks, I just see the one stick, but he's hitting it in a certain way and letting it ring just enough and then choking it off. It sounds a lot like what we just heard on Bugle Call Rag. But if you haven't seen that, look up Jazzmania Quartet on YouTube and watch the drummer. I mean, that's the best part of the film. It's a good band, and the pianist even plays a quote from one of Bix's tunes. But the drumming is fantastic on that, as it was on Bugle Call Rag here. When we came up with this idea of playing different drummers playing Bugle Call Rag, this is one of the ones I was going to pick, but that rascal Josh beat me to it. And my other choice was the Rhythm Makers, and I got beaten to that one too. But I'm happy to hear this. I just love what Vic Berton plays. I think this is one of his best records. There's no bad Vic Berton records, but I think this is one of the very best, showing the minimal amount of equipment he took into the studio with him and how much sound he got out of the block and the cymbal. What a wonderful sounding cymbal. And those timpanis that's really a gorgeous sound. I think that adds so much every time he does that on a recording like this.
Lovely, thank you, Hal. Well, from my point of view, I thoroughly enjoyed that. There is a unique feel about those Red Nichols sides with Vic on them. The whole ambience of the thing, particularly where he's playing those timpanis, and you don't hear that anywhere else. And I thought it had a great deal of charm to it. It was interesting. There's lots and lots of different things going on there. I noticed that break that was mentioned earlier. Red Nichols sounded like he intended to do something else, but I'm not sure that wasn't what he intended to do, and it worked perfectly. So, as far as I'm concerned, this was a wonderful track. Josh, have you got any conclusions on your choice?
Yeah, I think one of the closest sounds that we've come to this is when Keith Nichols recreated the Red Nichols music at Whitley Bay. And he had Andy Shum on cornet, Michael McQuaid was in the group. I mean, just phenomenal. And Nick Ward was playing drums and was really capturing all those Burton-esque type things. And when he was setting up for it, I looked at Nick, I'm like, hey, Nick, where's your timpani at? And he looks at me and he goes, I thought you were bringing them from America. So like, right back. So, but I mean, it's so great because you talk to the drummers that are into the music of this early day. You mentioned Vic Berton, and people's eyes just light up and their ears light up because everybody's learning something from him from all those sessions he did with Nichols, but then he did with Roger Wolf Kahn, and then with his own orchestra too. And when I do my little drum bit, I'll actually be playing my timpani that I have here that are leady timpani that are the same that Vic Berton played. And when I did a Facebook thing many months ago during COVID, I actually covered Boneyard and played the timpani riffs off of that on Facebook. And people writing me, "Oh my gosh, it sounds like Vic Berton." And so I'm hoping to bring the timpani out to the Vix Festival this summer and do one of the Nichols tunes and play timpani on the set. It'll be the first time in 50 years that timpani have been played at this festival. And Hal's going to be there, so Hal will probably get to see it too. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Josh. Well, that was the first track. Jack, we move to your choice now. So tell us a bit about the track that you've chosen and why you've chosen it.
Well, this song's called Bugle Call Rag. Yeah, well, so I had some confusion with this one because basically I looked down the list and I was like, oh, I know most of them, and I was like, oh, great, but I'm just gonna go through. There's a version of my iPod that came on, and I was like, oh, but it was a really good version. I'll just try and find it. I went back through, and then I got confused because it was on a Red Allen compilation I had. And then so when I don't know if you guys are in the email thread, but I was like, oh, I've got this version. I'll find it for you, John. And then anyway, it ended up being the Rhythm Makers version. It was just because he was on the recording. He wasn't just on this compilation album that Hal now I found out wanted. And John already had, but he gave it to me, thankfully. so I pinched this off two of you. So I don't actually know much about it because when I was trying to look it up, it said one place I found said it was Zutty on the recording, but I didn't think it sounded like him particularly. And then when I asked John, said it's Gene on it apparently. So yeah, I haven't got much else to say about it really. I just thought it stood out for me on the versions that I'd heard, and so I was like, oh, let's put this one through. And I obviously chose a good one because two of you tried to get it, so that's good.
Okay, well, let's hear the Bugle Call Rag from the Rhythm Makers from 1932.
that's also one that I would have picked if it hadn't been chosen already. So because that's always been there is a version of that with that band with Zutty playing drums. I mean, that one was Krupa, but there is a version of that with Zutty.
I see.
But yeah, that's just everything about his playing on that, just how much he's sort of interacting or how, I mean, busy, but just sort of the thing about Gene Krupa that I always thought was so interesting is he often seems to be kind of playing almost like a counter melodic line through an entire piece. If you listen to him, he's sort of, it's not just that he's playing drums in a rhythm section, which is of course he can do, and that's a great thing to do, but he's got something different going on where he's just interacting in a different sort of way. And but one of my favorite moments in all of music is when he goes to that choke cymbal at the end, because it just kicks into high gear in such a great way. So, and also Oh Peter from, I think, that same session, he does a similar thing. And I always loved Gene Krupa's playing on these. It's just interesting to hear him. 1932, it's before he plays with, it's before Benny Goodman and before some of his other influences. It's just very interesting to hear him in that period, and he sounds great. And some of it is still, some of his signature things that he would do were already in place there, and he's only maybe 23 or something. So it's pretty impressive.
Lovely. Thank you, Kevin. Nick?
Well, I was going to point out, in case he didn't already, Kevin's favorite texture of bass in 4 and drums in 2, or vice versa with that bit when he was playing the choke. Absolutely super, isn't it? Also, Josh was talking about great Whitley Bay recreations of the past. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was sort of lumbered, as I thought, with doing an Eddie Condon set, and sort of got sent all the music. And then that was one of the first tracks that was sort of, sent, oh, we're going to play this. And I'd never heard it. And it absolutely knocked my socks off. So yeah, no, it's absolutely terrific track. Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to hear Gene, he's even though he's got this kind of interactive thing more than probably a lot of people had at that point, it's still at the very last chorus, the most exciting thing he can do is to go to choke cymbal in 2. And it's like, that's, even in the sort of, we're not in the 20s anymore, and I know it's early 30s, but it's like, well, that's still kind of his go-to thing for like, okay, it's the very last chorus of an exciting tune. I've got the final kind of gear, gear 6 to go into is that. And that's quite interesting. When
that kind of just, sorry, I was going to say, but you can see how that just leads to him like ending up doing later on doing like a backbeat on the 2 and 4. It's just a natural progression from it, isn't it? So it's like I think that he's putting the DNA is already there that he's putting down there, isn't it?
Yeah,
even though he's one of the guys that we kind of think of as being one of the guys who kind of took us away from that choke cymbal all the time. He actually, at this point, he's still kind of doing it and doing it brilliantly, of course, because like he did everything.
Lovely. Hal, would you like to go next?
Sure. You can hear little bits of what Gene played on this track on the earlier records he did with Red Nichols from 1929 and 1930. But then it's refined again on the records he made with Fats Waller and his buddies in 1929. But this is kind of the distillation of all the good hot stuff that Gene was playing to my ears. And I especially love what he did with the tom-toms. Those turnarounds remind me so much of Paul Barberin with Louis Russell, with where he placed the beat and the phrases that he played, although it's Gene's own phrases. He's putting in some accents in places I never would have thought to play on the tom-tom, but it just, everything he did moved the music along. And like you all have said, when he went to the choke cymbal at the end, that really shifted the gears again. This is one of my favorite records by Gene Krupa for all those reasons that I just stated.
Lovely. Thank you, Hal. Josh.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's pretty much hit everything right on the head of what I was going to be saying there. I mean, that ending, it just makes you want to go like, oh, cha, and it has that feel to it when he's just on that 2 and 4. I mean, you just see the whole band just going along like that. It's like, you just can't help but sit still. I'm sure the dancers were just going crazy for something like that. And I could barely sit still. But when you're hearing him drum, I mean, yeah, it's the Krupa. It's that Chicago feel he's got to him. It's like, oh my gosh, this feels incredible and sounds great. But the same thing, that cymbal, that also has a very distinct sound to it too when he's choking it. And it's like, wow. I mean, it's different from Berton. It's different from Paul Barber. And it's different from Baby Dodds. I mean, it's his sound. And I think that's what's really neat. You can just kind of pinpoint it out like that. But yeah, everybody else has pretty much nailed everything on the head that I was going to mention. It's just a beautiful song. It just really drives.
Thank you, Josh. Well, I'll just add that when I bought this on an LP many years ago, it listed Zutty as the drummer. And for many years, I thought that was the case. But that break that he takes in there doesn't sound like Zutty. And when we come to Hal's choice in the next record after next, we'll hear the different approach that Zutty takes to doing the breaks. This is Gene for sure. And I know we've discussed this before, Hal, on Facebook many years ago, first time. So to me, it's Gene. It's very exciting stuff. It's press rolls, I would guess, on most of the ensemble. We can't hear it very clearly because of the record balance, but you're quite right about those tom-toms and where he's placing the tom-toms. What we're not hearing on there is the sticking technique that he used with the Benny Goodman band a couple of years later that characterizes Gene's mid-30s playing on pretty well every record. And one thing I will say that he used choke cymbal right the way through the 40s as well. So he didn't ever abandon that style of playing, and he would use that to good effect quite often. And I don't think that there is another take of this with this band with Zutty playing drums on it of Bugle Call Rag. There is an alternate Bugle Call Rag, but it's from the same session. I think that's right, isn't it, Hal?
That was my understanding. I didn't think there was a separate session with Zutty. I thought there were two takes with Gene.
Yeah. Yeah,
maybe I had something that was mislabeled like what you had, John, although that other take that was labeled Zutty, I haven't listened to it in a long time, but from what I recall, it was drastically different. I remember it not sounding like Gene. Like the break and everything was very, very different from what I recall, but it's been a long time since I've listened to that one.
Well, it may well be the one that Hal has chosen, so we'll see how that develops.
Yeah, no, I think what everyone said is like, it's because I think there's a labeling issue, isn't there? Because when I saw it was Zutty, but it didn't. But again, that the break didn't sound. I didn't necessarily think it was Gene, which I should have done because it's obviously him now, and it's great to hear his early styles coming through. That tom tom's really high pitched as well. It's interesting. I wonder if this wouldn't be in Chinese now. I guess would have been tunable.
Oh yeah.
But he's shown it. It would have been. Do you say?
Oh yeah.
32. But so we can't hear a hi-hat. Would you have had a hi-hat?
I don't think so. Well, Hal will know best probably, but
yeah, it's great to hear it. Yeah, it's great to hear him without some of the, so used to hearing him play his beautiful hi-hat. So it's it's great to hear early, pre-swing Gene, and his ideas are already forming.
Great.
And I really enjoyed the trumpet playing as well, I should say. Great trumpet breaks and just the phrasing with the band. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're on to the next track now, and this is the choice of you, Nick. So tell us about what you've chosen.
Right. Well, I mean, we had a little bit of, or a reasonably big bit of Joe Daniels last week, and it seemed to spark a certain amount of interest. And when somebody mentioned Bugle Call Rag, that's right, it was Bugle Call Rag, wasn't it? That's why we're even doing this. How silly of me to forget. And yeah, it reminded me of another recording of Bugle Call Rag that he'd made, I think, about 5 years before. I think it was 38, the one I played last week, where he also takes a characteristically kind of weird set of drum breaks. So yeah, this is the year after the record we just heard. So whether they would have heard the Gene Krupa version that we've just listened to by then in Britain, I don't know. It seems a bit unlikely somehow. I'm not sure how quick the sort of distribution of records was across the Atlantic at that time. But anyway, yeah, so this is Joe Daniels on the drums with Harry Roy's orchestra. I've got a list of everyone who's playing, but you probably don't really need to know. There's some good trumpet playing. There's a nice tenor sax player, and this is from May 1933 in London.
1, 2, on the left, quick, march.
There we are, Harry Roy and his orchestra from 1933. Kevin, we'll go to you first.
His playing there sounded a little more aggressive to me, maybe, than the other one that we had heard. But that was really driving. I liked how he was using different parts of the set. I liked the choke cymbal behind the piano there, and seemed to be going back and forth between playing the bass drum in 4 and in 2, from what I could hear. And that was a really nice effect. And then that was wild breaks at the end. I mean, that drum break, that was, that's definitely something I have to listen to again to try to hear what he was doing there. So that was really nice. I liked the other one we heard. I like this one even better, I think.
Lovely. Thank you, Kevin. Hal?
That was a wild break. I was doing my best to try and count that, and I didn't, but he sure did. And the band responded. They came right back in, blazing away. That arrangement reminds me a little bit of the one Cab Calloway did. I was trying to think, where have I heard that before? And I think it's real similar to the one Calloway did. That was one I thought about picking, by the way. It's got wonderful drumming by Leroy Maxey, but you can't really hear him clearly, and there's no drum break. So I passed on it and picked something else. But this is a wonderful example of Joe Daniels for someone who's not as familiar with him as some of the other drummers we're talking about today. He really was a fantastic player. And I also love that choke cymbal behind the piano. Reminds me of Paul Barber and Louis Russell on Jersey Lightning, where all the rhythm section drops out except Paul Barber and Louis Russell. And he's just wailing away on the choke cymbal in 2 and 4. Really, really good effect. That's a great choice.
Lovely. Thank you, Hal. Josh?
Yeah, I just listened to the Cab Calloway recording about a couple days ago. And then when I heard that, I'm like, oh, it literally does the same exact recording as the Cab Calloway band. But you just don't have Cab doing his vocals behind it, like that, oh, that he's saying.
It's the stock, I think, that arrangement.
It is, yeah. That's what it sounds like. I mean, when I listen to that arrangement, I'm like, wow, that's the Calloway arrangement. But they inserted the drum at the end, of course, put that in to be a feature for him, which was, I think, cool. Because that's not on the Cab Calloway version. But just a great band. I mean, very similar to California Ramblers when you're hearing music of theirs, and they really they probably had heard the Calloway version, if I'm right, by then, and so to actually have the sound close to it in their own sound too is really cool. So
lovely. Thank you, Josh. Jack, what did you make of it?
Does the Calloway version have the strange nods to other pieces?
Yeah, like all in the beginning part there, all those, that da da da. Da, 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 da. They have all those, and Cab Calloway's doing vocals over all those breaks that are in there.
Right, it's very strange. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it, and I'd love to hear those drum breaks again, because to me that almost sounded. I need to hear it again, but it almost sounded like a lick, which like you never really think of. Like it was like a long flowing lick almost, which you never. Like, I don't know, people will say like, oh, nowadays, like Steve Gadd's got a lick. It's like, oh, that's Steve Gadd. And it's like, it's long flowing thing. But I'd love to hear if that was like, I wonder if that was a pattern he practiced and just managed to get it in. You know what I mean? or maybe it was fully improvised. I'd have to hear it again. But yeah. And I also really enjoyed the cymbal behind the piano. Like I thought that texture was great. But yeah, it's just very, I thought it was quite funny. That arrangement actually.
Thank you, Jack. Well, from my point of view, this is one of the early recordings that I bought when I first got interested in jazz. And it is a British band, obviously, but it doesn't really sound like one. It's got a lot of heat, a lot of excitement to it. I didn't realize it was Joe Daniels at the time until much, much later. And of course, I was familiar with his name as I got some of his stuff on 78s, as we said in the previous episode. But this was great. I think what he was doing was wonderful, and it was very, very exciting. And I think he was a fine technical drummer as well, with very, very good chops. And this, as I say, got resonances for me. And I think the piano players, Ivor Morton and Dave Kay, I think the band pianists on that, and they were featured quite a bit throughout. But the drumming has it for me, a wonderful track. Nick, would you like to wrap it up on this one?
Well, I mean, the one thing I didn't mention when I was introducing it was I kind of found out about this track because we were playing that arrangement, the stock arrangement, with in Alex Mendham's band. We've mentioned Alex once before. This is about, going back probably 9 or 10 years now. And so, yeah, he sent us all out the sort of, a list of sort of charts we were playing, and then a sort of listening reference, and this was one of the things, and I just did a backflip when I heard that. It was absolutely amazing. I was like, what is this drummer doing? And of course I had to play the drum break because Alex was like, we'll do that drum break. And it was like, I think at the time I worked out some kind of approximation, but that's so long ago, and we haven't played that track for a long time, so or that arrangement I should say, for a long time, so I can't quite remember exactly what I tried to do. I never quite got close to what Joe does, and I've got no idea what kind of a drum it is he's playing that lick on, because I don't think it can be. It sounds like a snare drum without snares on, right? But a few beats later, he plays a rim shot, and you can very clearly hear he's got the snares on again. So it's like whether he turns it off and then plays that. I don't know, but yeah.
Do you think it was a set pattern then? Do you think that's something he's practiced, or is that improvised?
I think you're absolutely on the money with what you said. I think it's a hot lick that he's worked out. It's some kind of paradiddle or something. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, guys.
You located any family of Joe Daniels? I forgot to ask that.
Have I looked them up?
Yeah.
Not really. I've met a bloke who knew him quite well and had a lot of his records, and we had a good chat about him and stuff. And he had some signed books and this, that, and the other. But I imagine they'd all probably be in South Africa. So I don't really know. It's not a place I've ever been, or it's a good point. I haven't really thought of it, to be honest, but yeah.
He was active quite late on, I think, wasn't he, as well?
I believe he was, into the 60s or even maybe, yeah.
And I played with one of his trumpet players, with Alan Wickham, who was in the Dixieland band. And I never thought really to ask him much about it then. It's, it's too late now.
Yeah. Josh, it's something we should have asked Keith about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure Keith knew him. I'm sure he did. Must have done. Met him probably, yeah.
And what a loss to the music scene over here Keith Nichols is as well.
Absolutely incalculable, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to...
Right, anyway, let's carry on with the next one, and how you're in the chair, and this might resolve the possibility of this alternate take that Kevin heard of Bugle Call Rag, just possibly. So over to you, Al.
This Bugle Call Rag by Zutty and his band was actually my fifth choice for this program. You all had already picked the Red Nichols and the Rhythm Makers. And as I mentioned earlier, I thought about the Cab Calloway, but you can't really hear Leroy Maxey too much until the very end. And there's a Spike Hughes record with Big Sid Catlett that I also thought about using, but no drum break. He plays tempo blocks behind one of the horn breaks, but no actual drum break that I recall, or at least not enough to put on this program. So I picked one that actually has drum breaks by one of my heroes, Zutty Singleton. I can't say too much about this band. It was recorded in Chicago in 1935. When I got the recording, I thought, oh boy, Zutty and his band playing Bugle Call Rag. I can't wait to hear this. And I put it on and I thought, that's not what I was expecting. And I looked up the personnel, and Vernell York, trumpet. Who? Horace Eubanks, clarinet. Okay, he played with Jelly Roll Morton and Charlie Kreth. That's probably where he met Zutty. Henry Gordon on piano. Mike McKendrick, I know who he is, on the resonator guitar. Leonard Bibbs on string bass. Made a bunch of sessions around Chicago and wound up in Los Angeles in the 1940s, but no big deal records, name records that we would recognize. So this is just kind of an oddball combination of players, and I'm really not sure why Zutty wound up with this lineup when he was in Chicago in 1935, when he could have had Omer Simeon or Cicero Thomas or Jimmy Cobb or a good Earl Hines style pianist. This is a total mystery to me why these guys are here. And I hate to say it, but the only highlight for me is Zutty's breaks at the end. And I will point out that he plays the snare drum on one of the breaks, and it sounds a little bit to me like what Gene played on the Rhythm Makers. The phrasing sounds real similar to what Gene played. I'm sure you guys will hear that too. And also listen for the tom-toms. He's obviously playing Chinese tom-toms. This is before he got his leady set with the tunable tom-toms. And it sounds like he's got a woodblock and a cowbell. When he plays the cue to for the last chorus, the thing we're used to him hearing 4 beats on the cowbell, it's got so little tone, it sounds like a woodblock. It almost makes me wonder if he didn't have a cowbell on this session, he's just hitting a woodblock instead. But I'll be interested to hear what you all have to say about that. Okay,
here we go with Bugle Call Rag by Zutty from 1935.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's incredible. I mean, who was on bass, Hal?
That was Leonard Bibbs.
Okay, what a bass solo. I mean, just slapping the heck out of it and just dun 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 dun. And he actually had that triplet even going in there too. So, but all the breaks, I can just imagine like Zutty going with his head. Just getting into it, and I mean, watching plays like, oh my gosh! I mean, it's so Zutty. And as I was listening to that recording, I was looking up on my wall because I actually have a signed photo of Zutty up there behind his leadies, and it's like, oh my gosh! So I mean, I'm imagining the cymbal in the middle, and just what doing for getting around the kit there for gear, and it's like, I love seeing him perform in those, and of course, I mean, we love the mopping and bopping solo. with Fats Waller, but then also getting to watch him drum in stormy weather. It's great. But I mean, great track. I can understand what you mean by the personnel, but boy, when the bass solo kicks in, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, it wakes you up there. So
lovely. Thank you, Josh. Kevin.
Well, so that wasn't the recording that I heard years ago, and I have a feeling that again, here's something new I'm learning today. I think on that Red Allen band there were alternate takes of Bugle Call Rag and O Peter that were listed with Zutty, but those alternates, the ones with that we know are Krupa, I'm pretty familiar with. The other takes I haven't really listened to in maybe 20 years, but I just remember them being much more subdued and not really sounding like Gene. But it makes more sense that it would be the same day and just alternate takes of those. So maybe he was on those, but just playing a little more restrained. I really can't remember those takes too well. But on this, definitely Zutty is the star of the show. And all his breaks were great. A couple things that stood out to me that I liked a lot. He did a little press roll going into his breaks, just a really nice kind of lead in that just sort of set up the breaks he was taking, just this nice little roll into it. And then also, I always like on horn breaks when the drums maybe make some kind of punctuation in the middle of the break. Like if somebody just leaves a little space and maybe the drums just play a hit in the middle of someone else's break. And I can think of some recordings where Cliff Lehman does that to great effect. And that one little cymbal beat that Zutty played on one of those breaks in the middle there, it was just the perfectly placed accent. So even though this might not have been the greatest band, it just shows you Zutty, he sounds very inspired. He's really playing at his best and making it a recording really worth listening to, mainly because of him. So it was Zutty Singleton is always great. So this was no exception to that.
Thank you, Kevin. Jack?
I'd love to know if that was a perfectly placed cymbal or a mistake in that break, but it was great either way, wouldn't it? I enjoyed it as well. It's a great breaks again at the end. And so I wanted to ask Hal again. So this was booked and this was recorded under his own name? Yes,
Zutty and his band.
That's super interesting. Yeah, but it's a weird lineup of people. Like, I think that maybe it was arranged last minute. No one was free or something. I don't know. I find that.
I wondered about that too. Like if he had a call into some better players and they bugged out at the last minute because Decca wasn't paying enough, or who knows at this point. It just seems strange to me that he'd hire this combination, considering who all was around Chicago in 1935 and would probably have been happy to have played on the session.
Yeah. No, but I love that sort of thing. Looking back, I wonder why that. Yeah, I guess we'll never know. But I quite enjoy it. I think feel the same. It wasn't the most. I guess it's just not the best arrangement, is it? Maybe it's not. The bass solo, the bass break stood out, and Zutty's breaks. But otherwise it was cool. And I think I agree. I don't know if there is a cowbell. Maybe it's just quite a high pitched wood block. I'm not sure.
Or the hoop.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Nick?
Oh, I mean, it's knockout. I had a very similar experience to Hal. I found that on a 78 and was like, oh, fantastic Zutty. And then again got it home and went, it's a bit like watching Lionel Messi playing when he's playing for Argentina, a world-class talent trying to lift some quite sort of pedestrian colleagues, and to make great art, nevertheless, because he's got that, that sort of mercurial ability to sort of lift them all up to his level almost, or try to. Although I did like the guitar break as well. I thought you could tell Mike McKendrick, because he played with Armstrong and Bechet and a few other people, hadn't he, by then? So he was definitely a decent player.
I meant to say that as well. Sorry, I enjoyed this. It was a resonator on that. Did you say?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of sound kind of stands out. You can see why they were like popular, really, or like maybe not on the recordings, because it almost, if you hadn't said that was a resonator, I would have been like, is that a guitar banjo? It's a bit of a funny sound on it, but sorry I interrupted, but I thought that was a cool sound as well.
The other thing I thought was interesting, I mean, like, for one thing, the drums are beautifully recorded, which obviously with Zutty, you know, by this point generally we do get, but it's always nice to hear more of it. I loved in the breaks to be reminded again how he doesn't feel the need to overplay, but he's got such wonderful phrases, and the musicality, he's just playing melody. You know, it's this simplicity, but the right simplicity, you know what I mean? So it's got somewhere to go. He starts simply and then builds it. And it's always great to hear a master player like that doing something like that. And also I thought it was interesting that occasional point he would play an open sort of crashed cymbal on beat one of a break, which, you know, I would never do, I don't think, in this sort of style. I would always think that's sort of more of a later thing, but it sounds great and it worked, you know, perfectly well. So yeah, that was interesting.
Lovely, thank you, Nick. Well, from my point of view, I don't hear the similarity necessarily between Gene's playing on the snare drum on the previous recording with the Rhythm Makers compared to this. And when I heard this recording and compared it with that was what convinced me that it was Gene on the Rhythm Makers sides and not Zutty, because to my ear the Zutty sounds a lot more relaxed, a lot laid back. Gene's playing, his breaks sound quite urgent, sort of typical sort of Chicago style things, whereas the Zutty approach is a sort of a more laid back New Orleans feel to it. The other thing I noticed was with Zutty, when you hear him playing press rolls, you get that 4/4 feel, you know, the zhung, 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 zhung sort of feel that I hear with Zutty, which I could pick up on the beginning of that. Likewise, I found the band not the greatest in the world, but I'm prepared to put up with that to hear Zutty's wonderful playing, and wonderful it was. How would you like to wrap it up?
Yeah, the similarity I was thinking of between Gene and Zutty was the phrasing on the snare drum on the break, that boom, boom, bop, boom, bop, bop, because they both played something similar.
Yeah.
Just that little fleeting moment was what I heard that was similar. Otherwise, I agree, Zutty sounds more relaxed than Gene, but the Rhythm Makers was a little more driving band than this one too, so he got on board with that. And I don't know, this sounds to me like it was recorded 10 years before the 1935 recording date, until the last couple choruses when it starts swinging. It's kind of, it just takes a long time to get going. However, one interesting thing, of all the versions we've heard so far, this is the first one that uses the Old Miss strain.
Yeah, that's true.
At the end. The other ones have the break strain, and then the girls go crazy or bucket's got a hole in it strain. And this one has the other strain. So I'll be interested to see what the next couple recordings do as far as which strains of the tune they use.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. And I wonder if this was actually the first recording of that. I don't recall hearing any earlier recordings where they play that Old Miss strain. You know, prior to that.
I don't either.
Yeah. Okay. Over to you, Kevin, to introduce your choice, please.
Okay. This actually isn't a recording that I'm super familiar with, but I picked it because my first choice was already taken. And I wanted to do something with George Wettling because he's one of my favorite drummers. And I think he sounds great on this recording. And it's interesting because we were talking about Gene Krupa at different stages in his career and the changes in his playing. And this is from 1940. And George Wettling's playing was always changing. And this is getting to be kind of around the last period where he plays sort of exactly the way he's playing here. His playing on this reminds me a lot of the way he played a couple of years before this on the trio recordings with Bud Freeman and Jess Stacy. And so if you hear him on this, he has a Chinese cymbal, and his timekeeping, it's mostly on the snare drum, mostly press rolls, and then he'll also use woodblock and rims. And by a few years after this, he would often play a little ride cymbal and a little hi-hat mixed in with this. And then by, I think, the mid-40s, it was often about half and half. And shortly after the mid-40s, he stopped using the Chinese cymbal, except for once in a great while. And by almost the late 40s, it was mostly ride cymbal and hi-hat. So this is kind of the last part of a certain period of his playing. So I love all the eras of his playing. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but this is just sort of the end of one phase of his playing.
Okay, so George Wettling's Chicago Rhythm Kings, Bugle Call Rag from 1940.
I love that thing that George did during that era, the triplets between the blocks and the cowbell. That just lifts everything up to another level. Really, really wonderful playing. He kept doing that for a few more years. You can hear that on the Commodores with Wild Bill and Pee Wee and George Brunies. But then, as Kevin said, gradually that faded from his repertoire. It's too bad. But he sure sounded good on this. And what a nice relaxed version with a string bass and 2-beat all the way through. And George driving everything, but not overplaying, just playing exactly what needed to be played, and then laying into the afterbeats at the very end and just shifting the gears as we all like to do to take the song out. That was really beautiful.
Thank you, Hal. Nick?
Well, I mean, that was almost more relaxed than the New Orleans drummer, wasn't it? In a way, it was incredible sense of drive without being urgent. You know, oh, fantastic! I'd never heard that recording before, so thanks for that. Yeah, marvelous stuff. I liked all of the sort of Dodds inspired hoop and traps stuff, and I mean, yeah, I don't know really. There's so much to say. There was a lot of beautiful detail in there. I'd just like to hear it again. Really, I think I just need to go and listen to that now all week.
Thank you, Nick. Josh.
Yeah, I never heard that one either, like that with Wettling drumming, but I thought of like shades of like Ray Duke. I'm hearing a lot of the rim technique and then the cowbell and the different riffs. I'm like, wow, that sounds like some of the early Baduke that we've heard with the programs here. But really tasteful. I mean, just that the rim playing, you can tell he's not pounding the rim. He's just really just delicate and just being very musical when he's playing. And the ideas that he has behind the soloists are they're spot on. And it was refreshing to hear that because, as I said, I'd never heard that version of that song with Wettling on drums. So that was really nice. It's a swinging version. And right from the beginning, when they come in with the trumpet, it's like, oh my gosh, wow, here we go. And the band is just hitting on all cylinders from the first minute of the song there. But yeah, Wettling's playing is very musical. As I said, I could just hear that Baduke style in there, just with that delicateness that he's doing on the rims.
Thank you, Josh. Jack.
I was going to say the same. Yeah, just like having because I transcribed that Big Crash from China. He does loads of that like triplet split between two hands on blocks and the hoop and the cowbell, and I was like, oh, that's like George Wettling doing that thing. But I think that's my favorite version I've heard tonight. Actually, we'll see if the last one changes my mind. But I thought that was great. That's like a lesson for me in how to play like musically with the band as well. Like that's really fun playing these like great fun breaks, but it never seems to get in the way. And I think that was beautiful. The phrasing on that's how I'd like to play it. I also I might be wrong. I don't know if it might have been, sometimes it lags a bit from your computer, John, but did the tempo get picked up a little bit halfway through that trombone solo?
I didn't notice it. Perhaps some of the others did.
Might have just been a Zoom lag or something.
I think it might be. I heard it like I thought.
Yeah, I didn't hear it here.
No, it's fine. But thanks so much for bringing that in, Kevin. I need to do. I've got a few George Wettling albums, and I think he's great. But I haven't got that, and I have to look that up. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. Well, this wasn't one that I was over familiar with. I must say, I'm very impressed with it. And this is my favourite period of George Wettling, that period from 38 till about 43, when he's doing the Commodores that were mentioned with Wild Bill and Bruni's. Chris Tile posted That's a Plenty on Facebook yesterday, which is an absolute desert island disc. And we should do that on one of these forums and pull it apart and analyse Wettling's drumming on that, because he has got this perfect sense of taste and style with an excitement to it. It's the colouring of his playing that is to the fore on this period. I find when we get into the 50s, when he'd abandon all of these, the blocks, the rims, the cowbell, the Chinese, and all of this sort of stuff, when he's playing hi-hat and ride and that sort of thing with the 50s condons, he's a fine swinging drummer, yes, but this has got individuality to it and personality to it and excitement to it, and I find that very, very attractive. Who's the rest of the band, Kevin? Have you got any ideas, or anyone else though?
Joe Marsala is playing saxophone, Danny Polo on clarinet, Jess Stacy's on piano, Artie Shapiro on bass, Charlie Teagarden. Like I said, I'm not even that familiar with this recording. I just remembered that it existed, and I thought, oh, well, Bugle Call Rag, let's get George Wettling in there. So it's not one that I've listened to a ton, but I love George Wettling's playing on there. And on at the very end, where he goes into the backbeat, like Hal was talking about, kicking it in for that last chorus, it's sort of similar to what Gene did with the choke cymbal, just, and someone else had mentioned that, the choke cymbal or a backbeat. Nick, I think maybe you said that, but it's, just however you do it, but it was a similar effect there, just bringing that in at the end. And I just love the sound that he gets with press rolls. It's just such a nice supportive sound. And some of those drummers there's obviously so many different ways you can play time on a snare drum, just in the way there's so many different ways you could play a hi-hat or a ride cymbal. But some of those drummers had a thing where sometimes they could almost make press rolls sound like brushes. And I always thought that was a really beautiful effect, and not necessarily like an overbearing military kind of roll, which can be cool also, but just George Wettling could really just get such a beautiful supportive sound on the snare drum. So he's one of my favorites for sure.
Here's something, Kevin. This is what I was away from the camera for. I'm going to the Chicago Drum Show a week from Saturday, but 2 years ago when I went, I actually George Wettling drumstick.
Oh man.
But the WFL, and there's the tip.
Wow.
Oh,
that's really cool.
So I found this, it was in a bin, and I think I got it for 50 cents.
Nice.
Wow.
But I like how you say, and that was the one thing I was really trying to find out when we were listening to the recording, is you can actually then see what they're doing. Because all drummers had different tip sticks, different thicknesses. So it's great to see what I like to call what their tools were that they were using. And this was his tool for drumming. And it's like, wow, to get the press rolls with a tip like this is like, oh my gosh. I mean, that's pretty seeing that.
And the delicacy as well when he was playing all those rims and stuff.
Oh,
you can imagine you could be really delicate touch with narrow sticks like that with a small tip. Yeah, wow.
Great stuff. Thank you for that, Josh. Well, it's my turn now for the final one for the session. And I have chosen Baby Dodds. And this is a recording from the Rudy Blesh This Is Jazz series from 1947. It's Muggsy, it's George Brunies, it's Albert Nicholas, it's Danny Barker, Pops Foster, Baby Dodds, and I can't remember who the piano player is, but we might identify that as we listen to it. Baby Dodds is doing a lot of the typical Baby Dodds trademarks. There's not a lot of blocks in this. He's playing mostly press rolls and ride cymbal, which he was doing quite a lot on these sessions. As an aside, the late Ron McKay, who I knew very well, who used to play with Acker Bilt's band over here, with Max Colley's band latterly, worked with Albert Nicholas in the 50s. And Ron used to like playing a lot of press rolls, and Albert Nicholas didn't like them and told him to play ride cymbal. So as Albert Nicholas was on these sessions with Baby Dodds, one wonders if he'd asked Baby to play ride cymbal. And he was also, I think, on the Muck Carey New Yorkers, which are from around this time as well. Because as I think we've discussed before, we don't hear him, or at least I've not heard him playing ride cymbal on any of the American musics with Bunk or George Lewis or any of those, or Wooden Joe Nicholas or any of those. But by the time we've got to 47 and this session and the Muck Careys, he's certainly playing ride cymbal on these. And I think this is superb. We get to hear him do a couple of breaks, and the band is superb, and it's recorded live as well.
I quite enjoyed that. Actually, the thing that stood out to me most is the pianist. I don't know if we know who he is or not, but felt like he was a bit more modern than the rest of the band. There's some interesting like kind of breaks in it, and he did a kind of like long pedal throughout one of the other solos, which maybe was just particularly well recorded. I don't know, so it stood out more to me. But yeah, very, very exciting. Like Baby and Zutty, you can really hear where they cross over and their time periods together, and just that they're very. You can sing their drum fills back. They're beautifully phrased, and like that thing of being simple but well played, if you know what I mean. I think it's quite a hard thing to balance sometimes. Yeah, and it was live performance, wasn't it? So it was cool.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Jack. Hal?
I heard the ride cymbal behind Muggsy. Just kind of a nice shimmering sound, not the what we associate with swing or mainstream, but it just had a beautiful sound underneath what Muggsy played. And I think Baby's turnarounds on the tom-toms are totally different from what Zutty played or what Paul Barberin played. They're actually, to me, they're the most exciting of all. And it sounded like Muggsy was laying for that towards the end of the song, where he played the same phrase that Baby played, boom, bam, 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 bam. And it just picked up everything and made it go. Just fantastic. That was Joe Sullivan on piano, Jack, by the way, who was a little more modern in outlook than the New Orleans guys. But he was on that recording of Bugle Call Rag that we heard that you picked,
right,
from 1932. So he kind of kept refining his style a little bit. He could even sound like Count Basie on some recordings, but his heroes were Fats Waller and Earl Hines, and he always had strong influence of both of them in his playing. I thought he did a little Fats Waller quote, actually. Yep, for sure. I was debating running back to my office there and grabbing a pair of Baby Dodds sticks, but I didn't want to go off screen all of a sudden. But I can tell you all, he played Ludwig 4A, which was the Ray Baduke model, and it has a square tip, and it's great for playing press rolls. I have a pair that he owned, and I literally dropped them on the snare drum and they played a press roll. I've never had, that's the easiest press roll I ever played in my life. But of course, that's the one Ludwig doesn't make anymore. But if you can find them, they're really, really great for playing this kind of music. Lovely.
Thank you, Hal. Josh?
Yeah, I love the breaks that he does, like that. Shut up, doom. Shut up.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's like, wow, it's Baby with all that. And I agree with Hal. I mean, I love all of the talking drums that Baby does. We get to hear him do the press rolls. And I mean, yeah, I'm good to know for the sticks with going to that drum show. I'll see if I can find some, because they have sticks galore at that thing. So maybe I can find some for 50 cents. That'd be great to get. So, but I think what I love about it is just how smooth of a player he is. And I mean, just through the years, he has that style. And I think that ride cymbal is probably about an 18-inch. Wouldn't you think it was, Hal, that he probably played? Nothing bigger than that?
I think it's probably smaller. I would guess it's a 16 or something like that.
Okay, yeah. Because I know it's probably just paper thin with how he's playing it. Because when at my old high school, they actually had I think it was 17 or 18-inch, and it was like paper thin. And I remember putting that on for our jazz band one day, and I was playing it, and the director's like, "No, I need more volume out of it. I can barely hear you," just because it had that sound. And I wish I would have known that, because I would have borrowed that for at least the last 20 years here and used it. But it's such a great sound. It's like, wow. And yeah, just a beautiful recording. It just really swings mad. And just, I love hearing Babies play at any time. So, but I've always wondered that too about his sticks, because I know like the guys that like New Orleans guys have used like thicker sticks. There's that picture of Zutty with look like marching sticks. They're so big and the tips are big, but then with a 4A2, it's like, yeah, it's neat seeing that they tried different ones. And someone had said that Zutty had once used like the JoJo sticks that he had used at some point, and I didn't know if that was right, but I've been trying to read up and figure out again the tools that the drummers use to help get their sound, because I'll never be Baby or Chauncey or Vic, but it's like, well, hey, I have one of Chauncey's sticks, so it's like, well, this is the closest I'll ever get to sound like them. So
lovely, thank you, Josh. Nick.
Sorry, unmuted. Something that occurred to me listening to that was that all the drummers we've heard, the fact that we've heard them all playing Bugle Call Rag, and it's a kind of almost a send up of like a march or a Reveille bugle call thing. That's the whole point of the composition, is that perhaps a lot of them are having fun with drum cadences, playing around with those kind of little rhythmic cells and that boom, boom. I was like, oh yeah, of course. That's why a lot of these recordings have a drum solo, because they're kind of spoofing a drum call type thing, aren't they? And then obviously they're taking it off and going their own way, and that perhaps has informed a lot of these little drum breaks and solos that we've heard on these recordings today. I didn't really think of that until now, but and yeah, just the tone of those drums, it's so different from the tone that we've heard from Baby's solos and stuff. 10 years later or whatever. What year did you say this was again?
1947.
47, right? Yeah, it almost sounds like some kid playing a Pearl Export or something. The sort of the tone of the tom-toms are so kind of, maybe because it's a live recording, I don't know, but obviously with a lot more finesse behind the actual notes that he's playing. But yeah, I don't think, if you'd played that to me, I don't know if I necessarily would have identified Baby on that, but terrific as always. And he plays in the trio recordings that he made in the 50s, he plays some ride cymbal, doesn't he?
Yeah. When
he's playing, is it Body Bolden Blues or something like that, and he's playing sort of snare drum with all four beats on the snare drum as well, and ride cymbal. It's like, wow, that's such a great texture. I wonder if he was playing snare drum on that. I mean, we couldn't really hear perhaps because he's playing it softly, but that kind of like consistently riding thing without a backbeat. We talked about it last week or the week before, didn't we? I can't remember which drummer it was. It wasn't Baduk. Who was it now? Some drummer we'd heard that was playing ride cymbal but with no hi-hat and no backbeat. It was just like, and it's such a fantastic texture because it's this escalating tension, and then when there is the fill, or those kind of drum fills, it's like, wow, yeah, tension and release, and yeah, it's magnificent. I'd never heard that before. Thanks for that, John.
Lovely, thank you, Nick. Kevin.
One thing I thought of, I was just remembering, I think maybe this was back in high school or something, where I played a Baby Dodds recording for a friend of mine who was not really into jazz or didn't know any of these people. And he was actually a rock musician. And I just remember him saying, "Oh my God, listen to that bass drum." And that driving bass drum that everything he's doing is kind of built on top of. I mean, I don't know if people maybe who aren't drummers would realize how difficult it is to just play quarter notes for 3 minutes like that on the bass drum and have it all be so even. I mean, it's a pretty incredible thing. That was one thing that definitely stood out to me. And I really liked on the horn breaks and also the piano and everything, how sometimes he would fill in the last part of their break and do some kind of perfect little fill in the last bar or so. And sometimes he wouldn't. And he would just maybe hit beat 4 before coming in. And it was just always the perfect musical choice of when he chose to play a fill along with the break and when he chose not to. Every time it was exactly the right choice to make. And as Hal mentioned, all those little tom-tom fills and those offbeats, which no one really did quite like Baby Dodds. And even though on this recording, this is not so evident, but I always thought that Baby Dodds had a sense of time that was almost unlike any other drummer. It was really, I think, avant-garde in a certain way. And he would often do things that wouldn't really, to me, break down exactly mathematically, but it was always in time, and he had that bass drum going underneath it. But on top of it, it could be way out sometimes. And that's just another great thing that I don't really hear a lot of other drummers from that period doing. And he was older than most of these guys and doing that just like I said, just very avant-garde kind of thing. So he's definitely, he's one of those players where it kind of all goes back to him, you know?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes him stand out is, as you said, it's like, it's just a bit of, you can't really, if you try and play it or transcribe it, you can't really write it down. There's like fluctuation. I think he's, it really stands out.
Yeah.
He did a lot of cross rhythms and interesting tom-tom turnarounds and rims and all the stuff that we like with Bunk Johnson on the American music recordings. But the one thing we don't hear him play on those is the ride cymbal, because Bunk didn't like ride cymbal. At least he didn't like the way Baby Dodds played it. He is said to have said when he heard Baby playing it, "Oh, now tonight we've got the Iron Foundry." so Baby, obviously when they made the records, laid way off that, but he'd still do really interesting turnarounds on the tom-toms and fills on the rims and things like that. Those are some of the best records to hear his playing. Those 1944 and 45 American music recordings with Bunk.
Yeah, and he would do on some of the, he would do things that are just so avant-garde. Sometimes the band would be playing in 4/4 and he would play in 3/4 on top of that, but sometimes chorus after chorus. Like he just keeps going in a loop of 3/4, and it just creates this tension. You think, okay, he's going to do that for 4 bars, but then it just keeps going. And then when he finally comes out of it, I mean, literally maybe 2 choruses of playing in 3/4 against the band, which is another thing that most people just kind of thinking about, you know, oh, that older style would just kind of think, oh, something like that would never happen, or, you know.
Yeah, who does he think he is? Max Roach?
Right. But actually, I remember an interview with Max Roach where he was playing in a band that was opposite a band that Baby Dodds was playing in. And he said in this interview, again, about this kind of like avant-garde sort of time thing that Baby Dodds had. He said, Baby Dodds, I thought, sounded more modern than I did because of what he was doing. Yeah, and Gene Krupa picked up on some of those things. Sometimes Gene will play in 3/4 against 4/4, but not chorus after chorus like Baby Dodds did. But I've heard Gene Krupa play 4/4 on a waltz, and the whole band is playing in 3, but Gene plays in 4. So he's got his hi-hat on 2 and 4, but it's a waltz, and he just keeps doing that through the whole thing. And that's just a way out thing to do. That's as avant-garde as anything that Elvin Jones or anyone like that ever played. You know, I think most of us, or at least for me, I would be afraid to do that. You know, but
unless we're struggling to play in 3, and then we just stay in 4, it's fine. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this really hip polyrhythm, guys. Yeah,
sacked.
Well, I found it very interesting what you were saying there, Kevin, because that's how I hear Baby Dodds. When I first heard him play, and we're all familiar with those triplet rhythms that he plays on, particularly on the Bunk and George Lewis recordings. And when you hear Baby Dodds playing triplets on the blocks, they, on first hearing, sound quite ragged and sloppy compared to the sort of triplets you would hear Gene playing, and indeed Zutty, because both of those players are much closer in to the beat to my ears, whereas with Baby you get a breadth to the beat, and you know it's this African feel. I've got the recording of Art Blakey's African drum ensemble from the early 60s, where he's playing with a lot of African drummers on various percussion instruments, and you get all of these African rhythms going. And in actual fact, Blakey sounds the most stiff of all of the players, and there was nothing stiff about Blakey, but compared to these guys, you know, there is a different feel. And I hear that with Baby Dodds. I find that he is the most difficult of all of those players to try and imitate, to try and get anything you know, not that any of us could imitate those players successfully anyway, because they're all gods and they're all great. But to actually nod in that direction, it's more difficult to get close to Baby Dodds than it is to say Gene or Zutty or George Wettling and these players. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I agree.
To hear the difference already is a start, though, isn't it? You know what I mean? The fact that you're able to pinpoint that and realize that is the difference. And
yeah. It's where he plays those tom-tom beats as well. You will get them cropping up where you don't expect them. You know, it's fairly predictable. You can predict where Zutty's going to do them. You can predict where Gene's going to do them. And you can be 99% right if you listen a lot and work it out a lot, but you can't do it with Baby because they come exactly where you don't expect them.
Right.
Okay, any further comments before we close?
Well, if I may, the other thing I was just going to sort of suddenly flagged up and sort of think about is that it seems to me like Dodds and Zutty as well, and some of those other drummers, Barberin. I hesitate to say the New Orleans drummers because, of course, you know, I realise that they're all kind of influencing each other and, you know, travelling around the country. But a lot of the time when they're playing a fill, it seems like they keep the time going with one hand and fill with the other hand quite a lot of the time. Do you know what I mean? So some of those things that Baby was doing, he kept the snare going, went doom, 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 doom with those tom-toms, whilst perhaps the snare was still playing the 4 beats with his other hand. Whereas with, like, when we heard with Gene, he very much stops playing time and does some kind of exciting fill with a tom-tom with both hands and then goes back to playing time again. And that's like, just hearing those two, you know, almost we've sort of bookended this with Gene at one end and nearly at one end, because we had Berton first, didn't we? But and then Baby at the other end. It's like, oh yeah, these two approaches that sort of, I know, obviously Gene probably did do a bit of the first one, and I'm sure Baby did some of the second one, but it seems like generally that's how I kind of tend to pigeonhole them in terms of how they play fills.
Yeah, and you've got a very big difference between the approach that Vic Berton's taking as well, which is a much more academic approach compared to Baby, which is just, you know, I think it's African.
Yeah, there's definitely something, like we were saying, that Baby Dodds does with the time that I don't really hear in these other players, and certain things where, again, not so much on this recording, but other things that we've all heard where for a second it just sounds like it's going out of time. It sounds like he's not playing anything that makes metric sense. Just if you kind of, you know, it's kind of like the drums down a staircase kind of thing, but it comes out. And that's a really, to be able to do that, like I said, that's as avant-garde as I think any drummer in the history of jazz, like even today. So, but it's even,
go ahead.
I was going to say, it's even more striking because you're maybe not expecting it in this kind of context that Baby Dodds is playing in. So it really jumps out.
One thing that he did during this era that is unexpected, as you said, and it will really grab your attention. There's a recording, I think it's called The World's Greatest Jazz Concert on the Jazzology label, with almost the same band that we just heard, if not the same band. And they're playing at the Jazz Band Ball. Somewhere in the ensemble, Baby is cranking away 4/4 on the bass drum and stops playing the bass drum, but plays fills across the top of the set while the band is playing. And it's like, what was that? Then he comes back in playing the 4. And John, I just heard a recording of the Crane River Jazz Band with Colin Bowden doing that same thing.
Yeah, he's the closest that we've got over here to Dodds, and I think the closest I've heard anywhere.
But I'll send you guys that recording if you haven't heard it. It's really, really something else the way he played.
Yeah, I know that one for sure. Yeah, and I agree about Colin Bowden. He really is able to capture that.
Yeah,
and that later period Dodds stuff. Yeah.
Hopefully, Colin will come back to playing. I'm not sure. He's obviously had the layoff during the COVID thing, and he wasn't playing very much. I last saw him in September 19, and he was still playing wonderfully, and I've got some video of it, which is great. Right, we're running out of time now, so I'll close it here. Thank you to my guests, Kevin Dorn, Hal Smith, Josh Duffy, Nick Ball, Jack Amblin, for taking part in this Drummers Roundtable. We want to do it again, chaps, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Cheerio, everyone.
Bye.
Guys.